Well, I appreciate your time first and foremost. I mean, maybe you want to kind of start off with who you are and maybe what Allentown is to you, where you grew up, what school you went to, kind of things like that.
Well, I'm Josh Fogerty, as you well know. I haven't lived in Allentown for about 10 years. It'll be this coming August. I left Allentown after I graduated in 2011 from William Allen High School, the best high school in Allentown. And I went to Ithaca College in Ithaca, New York, and stuck around after I graduated. Always visiting home in the time off from school and then afterwards, for holidays and sometimes during the summers. But my experience in Allentown growing up was something that I'm grateful for and really cherish. My experience specifically involved community. My mom, when she had me, was a single parent. I was an only child. I think my mom navigated the resources around her really well to put me in communities that I made lifelong connections with and helped me grow and learn. And whether it was my church community at First Presbyterian Church of Allentown, right, FPCA. Yeah, it's been a while since I've had to say it. Whether it was in scouting, sadly Troop 107 is no longer in existence, I believe, but Cub Scouts and Boy Scouts, and and in school too. I mean, that's where, in addition to church and like choir, school was where I really got into my my musical side. That's one of the biggest ways I've connected with you is being in all those music ensembles. We were in pretty much everything we could possibly be in, and all of that. I always felt like I had such a huge family and all these different like extended families, whether it was my church family or through scouting or through the music groups I was in. To me, Allentown is just like this nebulous of family that's just back somewhere. And unfortunately, I haven't seen so many people in quite a long time, due to COVID, but, also just time passes and, you move somewhere that's not right next door, and it's easy for time to go by and to find yourself in new communities. But that's what my Allentown experience, that's what I've really taken from it, which really gotten closer to the heart and to my the things that I think about. The communities that I was involved in and a part of.
Okay, no, that's great. You still have family in the area then?
Yeah, my parents, they live in the area in Allentown specifically. That's it for like immediate family. I've got a bunch of family scattered throughout like the Lehigh Valley and just in that part of Pennsylvania. But when it comes to immediate family, biologically, it would be my parents. But
right.
Again, it's like, my family was defined for me in a very different way than for a lot of people that have, either siblings or, both parents from day one. A lot of people have cousins that, they see all the time. And I have a couple of cousins poking around in that area. But when you ask about family, I think of a lot of different people that maybe aren't necessarily related to me, but I would consider them family.
Well, that's a really good point. I think that kind of hits the note home that you started out with community, right? I mean, and that's probably where you or it's seeming like at least maybe you're pulling some of the family strings from within that community nature. You left the area to go to college. You're up in Ithaca now, so it kind of takes that question. But what do you find within the community that you're in currently that maybe you're building upon, that you learned from the community you had in Allentown, or maybe that was absent within Allentown, within the community you grew up with, that you're now taking to another level or really enjoying being part of in your community in Ithaca?
Well, these days it's been hard, right? COVID has made it really hard to connect with new people in any way. And it's something that I've been thinking about. I just more recently started a new job, and when I go to work, I am more than acquaintances with a good handful of people, at least, if not more. But usually when you go to work, it's like, hey, do you want to grab a drink later or get some dinner later, or we can go to a concert, we're doing this fun thing. And like, that's not really a possibility these days. So it's been interesting navigating, like, building new relationships with people at this time. But I guess for me specifically, what I took from Allentown, this sort of a sense of like enjoying belonging to a community, enjoying knowing a lot of different people, a lot of diverse people, connecting with them, but then this sort of like community that all connects with each other. I ended up finding that here in Ithaca for a good several years, working in restaurants and bars while I was in school, working up to like a management level after school. It's interesting. Ithaca is a lot smaller than Allentown is. Ithaca has probably about like a quarter of the population. It's also obviously, well, unless you didn't know, it's a lot smaller geographically too. It's pretty centralized in like, a square mile approximately of just, your suburban area and your downtown. And really downtown is like more or less a couple of blocks.
More like a small town Main Street than it is like a
Exactly.
downtown.
Right. For a while, I would walk through the downtown, which is called the Commons. And, you can't walk around without seeing at least like 3 or 4 people,
Right.
And that's, that was a really cool thing. The community aspect is really here. I think because the community is smaller, it, to me, makes it easier to engage in the community. It's not hard to get to know people. I mean, the mayor of Ithaca, he's not like hiding away in some office. He's usually, pre-COVID out and about, and you'll see him all the time. And like, you can have a conversation with him if you happen to see him during the day or walking around, and who your community leaders are. And it's not hard to get to know them, like almost on a personal level. And that's been a really cool difference. That's honestly one of the reasons why I've stuck around a bit longer than I thought I would, because, it's really nice to not only have a community, but, in all levels, from knowing some people that own and operate their shops or their restaurants, but, knowing who like the civic leaders are, knowing who the smaller local level politicians are. I never experienced that in Allentown in any way.
No, that's awesome, man. I appreciate that insight for sure. Definitely really powerful when you're able to be a part of a community that you feel, not only do I live here, do I work here, do I have a family here, etc., but like I'm moving and shaking with some of the people that are helping to move the city along and kind of acting that progressive nature. So that's got to be exciting. Kind of leads me into the next couple of thoughts around why didn't you come back, and what would have made you come back, and maybe there's nothing, but just kind of thought-provoking questions.
I initially didn't come back. Quite honestly, I didn't really have much of a plan when I went to college. I really wanted to go to college. I thought that music was the thing to do. It made the most sense. I was not the best student in our class, or probably in the school, across at all grades. I'm sure there were many freshmen that were much better students than I was when I graduated. College was a great experience. I needed that experience to learn a lot, not just, from a textbook perspective, but a self-discipline, self-motivation perspective, and learned a lot about mental health. Again, not just a textbook perspective, but, from a personal perspective of, these are things that we all deal with, and you can either deal with them or not. And so when I was finishing up at Ithaca College, I had a great opportunity at a hotel that was just built. and I started working there. I was still working there when I graduated, and I was, pretty satisfied with just my situation at the time. I didn't feel like my degree was enough to help me go in the direction I wanted to go. I sort of figured out what I wanted to do with my education with like the last 5 minutes of college. So I was very grateful to be able to graduate and find a degree program that worked. I ended up with a bachelor's of music with an outside field in counseling, with the intention of going into mental health. But the degree program didn't really give me enough of a start into some sort of professional mental health world. It's not very easy to find like an entry level mental health professional job.
Yeah.
I needed more education, and I didn't really have anything that merited, going to a master's program immediately at the time. So I was happy with my situation, and I learned a lot at the hotel. And that was probably, at the peak of when I was really connected with so many different people in the area, due to the nature of my job. But now, I've thought about it. I thought about moving back to Allentown. It's always been so interesting over the past like 10 years. Every time I come back to Allentown, it's not like dramatically different, although there was a time when it was dramatically different, right? With like the hockey arena being built. One of the biggest things that has made my partner and I think about moving to that area, cost of living.
Yeah.
It is pretty expensive to live in a very small college town.
Private
Um,
college town.
yeah, it's something when landlords expect that every occupant of a bedroom can contribute to rent. My partner has 2 kids, and they don't currently have jobs to contribute to rent. So
Nor are
I don't
they
think
old enough.
I don't think the landlord knows that because he's charging us like they do. But no, that's just a thing in the area. It's tough to find. It's not very family friendly in terms of housing from our perspective. So that's been one of the reasons why we've really thought about moving back to the area. But I like Allentown a lot. It's about the right size for a larger place that we would want to live. It's got a lot of different areas that you can live. If you want an urban setting, you can live in an urban setting. If you want suburbs, you've got suburbs. Myself, I grew up somehow in the woods, but also in Allentown. So like it's got a lot of options. It really is like a beautiful city. There's so many cool things about it. The Parkway, like all the different parks, the festivals. Like I definitely wouldn't be shocked if we decided to move there over the next couple of years when it makes sense to, but hard to do that presently.
Right. Yeah, I admit I'm surprised to hear you say that, but obviously, if you ever make that move, let me know and I'll help out in any way I can to get you guys situated.
Well, thanks, man.
Something that wasn't like any question I prompted you with, but something that came across my mind when you were talking about going up to college. And could you talk a little bit about your experience with the Allentown Public Schools? I just know you personally, so you went through elementary, through middle school, through high school, and then went to Ithaca. So how do you feel the school district as a whole is, whether that's now or whether it's more of when you were going there, and did you think it properly set you up for success in college?
I assume that the verbiage that I use in this video should be like PG level.
Literally, you could say whatever. We're going to be editing things down.
Okay, great. Because like I was a complete ass with my educational experience in Allentown. I was one of the ones that benefited from, how good it can be. Well, I don't know. Honestly, it's kind of shady. I really did poorly in a lot of classes, and I'm, almost ashamed when I think about it, because I still somehow was in all of the classes with everyone that was smart but actually tried, and I didn't try. And as a result, I did very poorly. But part of me thinks that that's there's something wrong with that, right? Like there's so many kids that I know were like so smart and weren't afforded the same opportunity. And definitely, based on mostly their skin color, were at times treated differently. I don't remember what the numbers were, but I don't remember a lot of our teachers being,
Not
of
white.
color, not white, frankly, um, which didn't reflect the community as a whole. But it was um, if you were fortunate enough to be in those classes that were of a higher level, for the most part, the teachers were at least really good. Some of them like really stood out. I'm sure that you and I have some like similar people that we would say were like some of the ones that were really really incredible and cared about their students. I was grateful for the exposure to a lot of different people, different in terms of like skin color, sexual orientation, socioeconomic background. It taught me a lot that I think that so many people don't really learn about until they've really formed their own opinions, and it's hard to really like have this change of heart about people. You start making assumptions and all that. Overall, um, the opportunities that I were afforded were like pretty good.
Awesome. Appreciate that insight for sure, and really appreciate your time here today, taking some
Wait,
time
not enough
out.
money was given to music. Hold on, sorry. Music was severely underfunded. There are so many talented people in the performing arts, music, dance, drama, and it was never appropriately funded, which was a shame because the football team sucked, but they still had their fun and games. You were just the kicker, so you shouldn't be offended by that statement. But
No,
um,
no. I was only a kicker senior year because I had to go to the games for band. So I said, well, why not?
but yeah, music was not. That was a bummer. Again, the right opportunity was there for us. I think you and I would both agree that Wayne Kurtz was probably like the best music teacher, instrumental music teacher that we were exposed to through Allentown School District. We were able to connect with him. He cared a lot. He really pushed us to be our best, and definitely grew through his instruction for sure.
Yeah, it's funny to think about what we were as eighth graders coming into ninth grade with a basically full drumline of freshmen, and then what we look like by the time we're seniors, and just for our level of play, let alone the maturity. That's a whole nother situation. But
Yeah.
just this level of play, musicianship, and how the line evolved. Wayne definitely was instrumental to that because we all know Mr. Amston was not.
Nice. That was good. That was great.
Yeah, man, I don't want to keep you too much, and I'm on a free Zoom, so we only got 9 or so minutes left here. But two last thoughts I'd love to get from you. What is an aspect that you feel like this city could do to be more appealing, and the city being Allentown?
Be more appealing.
And
well, who are we trying to appeal? Who are we trying to appeal to?
Just the general public, really. I mean, as Pennsylvania's third biggest city, what can we do that not only brings more people in, but more jobs in, brings more ideas in, makes it more equal and open opportunity for all races, colors, sexual orientations, creeds. Maybe something doesn't come to mind, that's totally fine. But yeah, just throwing that out there. And if you want to marinate on that a little bit, the other question that I was going to ask is if there's anyone else that you think that we should interview.
Well, I'll give an answer to your first question right off the bat, because I haven't really spent more than a few weeks in Allentown since 2011 in a row, and it's hard for me to really say, to give it like an informed, educated opinion. I think that more investments have to be made into the communities in general. There's a lot of poverty in Allentown. The schools that we went to were not in great condition. I mean, when you're, finding cockroaches in your school, and there's like asbestos and all that. I mean, it's an old building, but like, you can't claim that you have a really well-funded school with those things happening. It's just not, doesn't make any sense to me.
Not quite
Um,
state of the art.
yeah, I mean, it like, it doesn't have to be even that, or the blackboards are actually all touch screens that, can do all this crazy stuff. But, investing more in the communities, investing more in the people that actually live in Allentown. Who cares about, in my opinion, who cares about bringing people together, people that are like different and trying to force them to be together? It doesn't really make sense to me. What makes more sense is making sure that everyone is being invested in like equitably and people aren't being overlooked. And I think that so many people in Allentown, at least from my experience, are, overlooked. And it's terrible, frankly. Allentown, like many cities in America, once a lot of North America, once the United States started really deindustrializing, you saw this a lot in cities all over the country. I mean, Scranton is one of the worst ones, where industry was taken out of the city. People left because they couldn't find work, like wages stagnated, and what you're left with is sort of like these just like carcasses of cities. And it's cool to see Allentown in some ways like go in a positive direction. I think from afar, it's hard to tell, but from my experience, investing in communities that are not being invested in, that would be my thing. You can't really like, what's the point of trying to attract more people to Allentown if the people that are currently in Allentown are being overlooked? Let's take care of the people that are in Allentown and, try to provide more resources, improve our schools. That, people don't move to places for these flashy, like sexy things. People move because they like the community. They like the schools if they have families. Like those are not simple to solve, but they're maybe not as flashy or sexy, but important, I think. Then again, I don't really know anything that I'm talking about. I studied how to sing and I ended up being a bartender instead. So
no, man, you're hitting the nail on the head. And I think what message that you're here throwing down, A, really resonates with me, and B, really resonates with a big portion and a big push of not only city leaders, but community neighborhoods that are pushing these city leaders forward into city council races and into mayoral races. And some really, really crucial candidates and races are up here this spring. And that's one of the things we're trying to shed some light on. So really appreciate that. Your time here, the efforts. We got a little bit over 2 minutes here. Do you have any final thoughts?
Allentown is a city like many other cities. You don't even have to go that far. Scranton is like another one that I think of that's pretty similar, has this history and looked very different 100 years ago, 50 years ago. It is the time. The time draws later and later for people to get really engaged with their own communities, but then those leaders of those communities and the people that actually can make those changes to like city codes and stuff like that. So it's cool to hear that. It seems like you're really involved in a lot of that, and I wish you the best of luck in all of your endeavors. You asked about someone next who would be really good to interview. I don't know. The first person that comes to mind would be Kelly Cardy or Wesley Gross, because they're much smarter than I am. And they actually tried in high school. So I think that, and I know that Kelly has been in like the educational field in New York City. I haven't talked to her in a very long time.
I think you're right.
And I don't know what Wesley's doing, but he just comes to mind as someone who, I'm sure would have a lot of good thoughts.
No, I really appreciate that. I just added them to my list here. We got about 15 seconds before this shuts down, brother. So I really appreciate your time here today. Glad things are going well. Glad to hear you're in a new position, and best of luck as you continue to maneuver your way up through Ithaca, and hopefully I get to see you soon.
Thanks, man. I'll see you soon.
Yeah, see you. Appreciate it. Later.